We're kicking off with the first presentation and the key reason why we are here today, which is to dive into the latest research along the Customer Experience Insights Research, CXI, group at Swinburne University of Technology. I would now like to introduce Dr. Jason Pallant, the co-director of CXI Research Group at Swinburne University of Technology, and Rajan Kumar, the co-founder and CEO of The Luminary.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you. And thank you to all of you. What a tremendous room. So I just want to pass on my thank you and appreciation for everyone coming out, enjoying the event today, but really supporting the launch of the research, which Jason and I are going to kind of give you a bit of a background as to where it came from, what it's about, what we're intending it to do. For those that don't know, the room's actually full of a representation across our industry. So we've got folks from technology vendors, we've got folks from education sector, right? And a lot of you are kind of from the brands that we interact with, that we love, every single day. And you guys have a really, really tough gig at the moment. I don't think there's been a harder time to be a marketer or a digital leader and live up to the customer experience dream, right? With everything that's going on in our space, all the changes, all the evolution, whether it's privacy changes and data regulations, whether it's AI, right? 48 hours ago it was ChatGPT 3 and now we have to figure out GPT 4. Your world has never been harder. And I was reflecting on my own journey and when I first entered this industry and the types of conversations that I was kind of having when I was within a group positioning the sort of technology we're talking about to marketing folks, right? And those discussions and those presentations, those pitches, usually started with digital is really key. You need to be where your customers are, right? Experiences are happening on mobile, the rise of mobile. It's a simpler time, obviously a much simpler time. And it would be crazy for us to have those types of conversations today, right? It's not required. Of course, digital is important. Of course, mobile is important. Of course, our lives as people are intertwined with the idea of data and technology, right? We don't have to continue that conversation. Often we're served some really interesting reminders, and I'm not the first one to bring this up. What you're looking at, for those that don't know, is LeBron James setting a new NBA all-time scoring record. The previous record was held by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It was set in 1989, so the record stood for a long time, right? And it was long believed that no one would ever break that record because Kareem's career was quite long. LeBron broke it a few months ago. He set a new record, and he'll continue to set a new record because he's not finished. And so now it's a long-held belief that this record, once he's finished and is retired, will never be broken again. So what people witnessed was probably a once-in-a-lifetime event, possibly a once-in-forever event. Now, the most interesting thing about this photo is not LeBron. It's great. It's a great shot. And again, I'm not the first one to point this out, and I know, Billy, you've done a post about this as well. It's the crowd and how they're witnessing this moment. The vast majority of people are witnessing this moment in real life through a device. Because what's most critical to them at that point in time is to get that photo. For whatever reason, right? Social media cred, share it with their family and friends, whatever it might be. And we're not going to get into a debate about whether this is good, whether this is evil. That's for another day, another research topic maybe. But this is a stark reminder that as people, digital technology is kind of intertwined with how we live, right? So when we think about this in the context of marketing, the idea that there is a need for us to debate whether or not technology and marketing are different doesn't really make sense. If marketers' job, and I'm using the word marketing in a broad brush sense, but those that connect brands with people, if their job is to do that, then marketing and technology are kind of intertwined, right? Forever. There is no marketing without technology. And herein lies the promise of MarTech. The promise of MarTech is technology that will help you connect to your customers, prospects, people that you want to bring to your brand through whatever channels and moments that they're experiencing in a really rich, data-driven, personalized, automated, buzzword way, right? That's the promise. This nirvana state of customer experience that we're trying to all deliver. But we do know it's not quite as easy as that. And we know this because we all in this room talk about this every single day. We constantly talk about the challenges with what we're facing. The unrealized transformation plan. The overinvestment in technology that perhaps isn't really delivering. Maybe it's the wrong technology. Maybe we've got to rip it out and implement some new stuff, right? The issues with processes and skill sets and peoples, these challenges are not new. They're actually things we've been talking about for years now. And then on top of those challenges, we've got new ones. Kind of like I just referenced, the idea of AI and having to solve and come up with strategies around AI. New technology, right? CDPs, data clean rooms. There's constantly innovation in our space. And so we're compounding these existing challenges, which you kind of know exist, with new ones. And when Jason and I first started talking about the Stacks and Stacks research piece and what we wanted to do, it was this kind of idea, these challenges, that really started to drive our thinking. It felt as if, though, above the surface, there's a lot of discussion about things like, let's use an example, ChatGPT. Rightly so, right? It is going to change the face of how we all operate. And there's lots of challenges like that. They get lots of visibility. There's lots of discussion in market. There's articles written about it. There's blog pieces wherever you go. But under the surface are these challenges that feel consistent. And we don't really talk about them as much. We don't really shine a light on them as much as we should. We don't really give them the voice that it deserves. And so the idea for us as we embarked on this process and this piece was, are we actually better off making sure that we can highlight these challenges that seemingly every organization, every marketing leader we speak to, every digital leader we speak to is facing, and making sure that's brought to the forefront? And when we started that conversation, we started with a very simple question, well, seemingly simple question. The question was, what is MarTech? From a pure definition standpoint, right? And it's not that easy to define. I've got a definition, right? The Luminary has a definition. As a consultant, I have a definition. Jace, I'm sure, has a definition as an educator, and a teacher, and a lecturer. There's vendors in this room which will have a definition, which may differ from the next vendor in the room. So there's no shortage of definitions. But the challenge, if you're a brand custodian, if there's no clear definition from the industry, that's a pretty gnarly challenge for a marketer or a digital leader to even start solving within your organization, right? And so this idea, this kind of inconsistency, is what really started to draw us towards this research piece. And what we wanted to do was dive further into, well, whose opinion and whose definition and whose voice do we want to showcase? We didn't want to add just another opinion. There's lots of great voices about MarTech out there. There's lots of brilliant opinions. There's lots of brilliant research that exists from people that are looking at the industry and commenting on it. What we felt, though, that was missing was a really deep understanding from people that are working in the brands, having to make sense of this space for the purposes of connecting to customers, connecting to people, to connect with their brands. And that's the voice we really wanted to highlight.
And so this is where we came in with this research around this idea of the voices of MarTech. And to Raj's point, the voices that matter. And for us to be able to get under the surface, to get to not just the tip of the iceberg, but the challenges that businesses are really facing, the things that we're not understanding, we're not talking about, we realized we can't just do another survey. This is not about what percentage of CMOs are overwhelmed with their stack, because we know that. It's not about the percentage of people who are considering the implications of ChatGPT, because we know that. What we needed, what was missing, what was lacking among the industry is that deep understanding and that opportunity for the voices of brand custodians, marketers, and people who are responsible for utilizing these tools within their own businesses to drive customer and business outcomes, for them to have a voice to tell us, what does this industry actually mean to them? Not us, but to businesses. And so that is what this research was designed to unearth. It's to give rise and air to those voices. The way we approach this then is, rather than a broad industry survey, of which there's quite a few, was a deep, embedded, qualitative study sitting with people who make these decisions and are in charge of these functions of MarTech within their organizations and the outcomes it creates. And hearing from them their experiences within their context, right? Going and speaking to these people as they are using these MarTech tools and trying to build their stacks, understand their customers and put it all together to say what is their actual experience, and critically, not just what is their experience, but what's driving that experience, externally and internally. So the voices that are represented within this report are leaders of some of Australia's largest businesses who are customer-facing and have that role of decision-making around what we call MarTech, and their deep experiences while using those tools. So to put it into context, we had 15 CMO, director-level business leaders speak to us like in depth, right? So this is not a quick phone interview. This is an in-depth, exploratory, qualitative study to understand their experience and the drivers of it. And so to put some numbers behind it, because I'm a bit of a quantitative guy, I know a lot of people here are, and so we're not talking about 100 people did a survey, we're talking about rich, deep case studies from 15 large organizations. But what that creates when you sit and talk to these people is an abundance of experiences, which once we take the recording, we transcribe it, ends up, if you lined it word for word with no spaces, you'd end up with a 232-page book just of answers to the questions, with no interpretation, no analysis, just what people told us. And then as researchers, we went through every one of those pages, every word and every sentence to pull out what are the key quotes here. And we ended up with 1,332. Now, I'm not going to show you 1,332 quotes today. What we have done for you is synthesize that based on our research, based on very detailed, rigorous coding and analysis of those quotes and those experiences to create the report that is sitting in front of you today. The process that we followed, the way that we did this research, has been academically peer-reviewed at the leading local national and international conferences. We've presented it a few times to some leading professors in the area, and this is our sort of public summary. So what you're seeing is quite rigorous, detailed research on these really detailed experiences of business leaders. What I'm going to share, what we're going to focus this presentation on, is not all the challenges that people told us, not all of the quotes. You've got those in the report, so I encourage you to read it. Those are yours to take. What we're going to focus on today and use to set up our phenomenal panel is talk about 5 key tensions that these challenges really unearthed. Right? Things that we think are the conversations we should be having of how do we solve for these things. And number one, which is pretty fundamental to what we're talking about and fundamental to this nirvana state of MarTech that Raj mentioned, is this inherent tension between automation and the promise it can bring and manual labor. We heard repeatedly from these leaders that one of the big benefits they could see from MarTech is being able to automate marketing processes, right? Reaching out to the right person at the right time with the right message requires automation, right? And that absolutely can happen, right? That is a benefit companies are already realizing. But the flip side of that is we also heard multiple examples where to do that required really large teams of humans doing a lot of manual processes to get various tools, data sources, teams to align to be able to do this thing called automation. So there's an inherent tension there between the promise of what we're trying to do, which is automate these processes, and the fact that to do so requires quite large amounts of time investment from people. This quote here, right? They've seen numerous organizations treat MarTech like a one and done, that's set and forget. And that's just, and apologize for my language, that's just bullshit, because it's only the enabler, right? And that speaks to this tension, right? Some brands are going in and being sort of sold a vision that MarTech is going to make everything automatic overnight. I turn it on and suddenly my entire marketing process is automated. But in fact, what it's really doing is enabling their teams to be able to perform their functions better, but not replace the need for those people.
Yeah, and I think from an industry standpoint and what we're seeing within businesses and some of the leading organizations is they've really wrapped their heads around this idea, right? That actually this is not about reducing headcount. Yep, it might be about automating processes that shouldn't be done by people. But once we do that, let's put these people and these skill sets, these cross-functional teams, against our strategic challenges that are going to drive growth. And so the leaders in industry have very much cottoned on to the idea that actually the game isn't reduction of headcount, reduction of people. It's repositioning those people to do things that are more growth orientated.
And people speaks to this second tension that we saw, which is around training versus retaining of staff, right? So there is a very known challenge of finding people with MarTech skills, particularly at the technical level, particularly as tools evolve, right? That's a known challenge. The other challenge we heard, which is very interesting, this tension, is that because of that challenge and those skills gaps, what a lot of businesses are doing is training their staff in these functions, in this understanding, in these tools, whether that be through formal means or whether it be through sort of more informal on-the-job training. Now, that is very beneficial because now we have a more skilled, trained workforce that can use these tools better, embed them across the business. The inherent tension that creates is that once you've then trained this person, they're now a MarTech specialist or expert, because of the skills gap, that person is extremely valuable and desired by all of your competitors and your bigger competitors and bigger companies not even in your industry. So we heard this consistent challenge where people are investing in people, training them, giving them these skills, just for them to then leave because they're now super attractive to every other business in not only their industry, but in others. And I think this quote is a really interesting one of saying, you get people who can't get into this space fast enough. They are so excited to improve their experience base, which adds to their CV, right? So this is talking to the fact that it's not about hiring people into marketing teams. It's about finding people. It's the fact that those people are joining, taking on MarTech roles because it benefits them and their CV as their next step. Very big challenge for companies that are then trying to automate and enable these cross-functional teams to work, that once these people have these skills, they're easily poached away.
And there's a clear connection between that idea of automation versus manual retention of talent, right? If you've got these highly skilled people who are continuing to grow and add to their skill base, they're going to want to do some pretty interesting, cool stuff. They don't want to do repetitive work. So if you can't provide that in your organization, within your brand, because you're not investing appropriately enough in the technology, in the processes, in the uplift, well, then they're going to leave. And they're going to leave, not to your direct competitor, like Jay said, but they'll leave to wherever within the broad industry they can go, because they are very, very attractive. The whole market is looking for this sort of talent, right? And I'm sure anyone sitting brand side right now, I can see lots of heads nodding, you're facing this challenge today.
This challenge of training and retaining people, right, is greatly enhanced by the fact that this space evolves so quickly. Right? Raj mentioned, 10 years ago, we were convincing people about digital, right? My honours thesis, my first ever academic study 12 years ago, was the question, do consumers research products online before they buy them in store? The answer is yes. But that was a key question. That was funded by industry bodies because they did not know the answer to that question, right? And now it's like the questions are like, given everybody's researching online, how do we prevent showrooming, right? But the fact that these tools, this space, what marketing is, but also then the technical tools that we use to perform marketing functions evolve so quickly, those skill needs from people also evolve extremely quickly. Now, evolution, new tools, new functions, new benefits can be extremely beneficial. Right? It can unlock new things. GPT-4 is unlocking new abilities for workers, for businesses. Apply, right? Every time a vendor increases or adds a new feature to a tool, there's inherent potential benefits there, right? But what we also heard is that that in and of itself creates a tension within businesses of one, retraining your staff to learn the new tool, but two, integrate that tool with the ones that you already have. And businesses are already struggling and overwhelmed by their current technical capabilities or lack of, that the industry moving forward can actually mean they're actually moving back. Right? And so this is a really challenging situation for businesses and vendors, consultants and educators to think about how do we help businesses keep up, not be left behind, while they are still having challenges integrating with legacy systems, core business systems that might come from global networks, might not be in the control of the local marketing team. And so we saw some really interesting quotes here, and one where what brands end up doing is keeping one foot in their legacy, the past, what they're doing for a variety of reasons, while at the same time trying to run forward, and they can't, they're stuck, right? So what ends up happening is they do both things. They have all legacy things, they have legacy people, teams, they have all new and evolving teams, processes and technologies. All that means is all of our problems are enhanced. We have more people, more resources, more money. So the fourth thing we're going to talk about is ownership versus access. And we heard across businesses, right, when we asked people to define MarTech, right, 15 people gave 15 different definitions. And then linked to that definition was 15 different businesses gave us 15 different examples of where MarTech sits within their business, right? For some people, it's the CMO. For some people, it's a CTO. For some people, it's an IT person. For others, it's distributed across the organization where whenever a team needs a tool, they get it and they just start using it, right? Now, there's pros and cons to each of those approaches. We detail those in the white paper. But what it speaks to is this tension between ownership and access, whereby if I have a central team that oversees MarTech, the benefits to me are I know what I have, I can map the stack, and I know that things are hopefully going to integrate better. The challenge with that is then if a team, for someone who's not in that team, needs the tool, needs the output from it, they can't necessarily always directly access it. We create silos. Alternatively, if I have it distributed and everybody can access their tools, what ends up happening is different teams, for some reason, have two tools that do the same thing but don't talk to each other. So there's an inherent issue here around how we think about and define MarTech, defines who owns it, where it sits within the organization, creates a lot of issues around who can access it when. We saw a lot of quotes, you'll see them in the white paper, about silos. There's a really interesting one here around different channel owners have different components of the stack. So the e-commerce team has some things, the in-store team has other things. This has created a lot of internal inefficiency and confusion.
Yeah, and I think, MarTech is a fairly young industry, right? But it's grown up really quickly, and its importance has escalated really quickly. So forget all the definitions, forget all the boundaries we need to put around it, and we'll figure that out. But if you boil it down to, ultimately, this set of tools and processes and people manage arguably your most critical asset, which is customer data, to interact with your most critical stakeholder, your customer. How are you going to govern that? And if you're leaving that to an e-com team to figure out, and then you're also leaving that to the marketing comms team to figure out, and then you're also leaving it to the digital team to figure out, that is not a good place to be in. That is not where the space is evolving towards. That's not where your customers expect you to evolve towards. So the idea of marketing ops is a rising view and a focus and a strategy. A lot of stuff coming out of the States around this area. But this will be a big piece, I think, in the next 2 or 3 years. This idea of ownership, governance, controls, security, right? Versus use. Versus how you execute comms, how you deliver experiments in market, how you deliver reports and derive insight. They are different things.
And the last one we'll speak to, which in some ways is the biggest and connects all of the other tensions that we heard, is in this sort of big questions of how versus we heard. Well, speaker died. So when we talk to people, when we read industry reports, when we read news, when we talk about MarTech, we focus so often on questions about how, the processes we're going to follow, the technical needs that we have of how I connect one tool to another, right? And these are large questions, so it's important that we talk about them. What sometimes gets forgotten, though, is stepping back and thinking about why. Why are we, what outcome are we trying to create? Why are we building this tool? Why are we in the process of talking about a new vendor? What is the outcome we are trying to create, right? Why do we need this investment? And this happens often as a challenge for a lot of businesses, particularly those who sit more closely to MarTech, is in explaining this why to other business leaders, right? Maybe it's the CFO, maybe it's the board. When we're asking for people, time, money, processes to improve our MarTech functions or stack, is can we clearly answer why? What is the outcome we're going to create? What is using this tool, turning this tool on, integrating this thing? How is that going to help the business? How is that going to help customers? And this is a real challenge that businesses are facing. And what it then creates is a lack of overall buy-in and support from the business as a whole. And we've got this really interesting quote here of CMOs are finding it hard to prove the ROI of certain MarTech tactics. There's this sense that some of them felt that MarTech was going to be the silver bullet to help justify the existence of marketing and CMOs, right? When again, going back to our earlier idea, what it is an enabler, right? But the question is, why are we using it? What are we enabling with it? is the thing that a lot of businesses are struggling with.
There's a great quote from one of the people that were surveyed in the report, and I'm going to paraphrase it. But it talks about working customer back, not tech forward. Personalization is a thing we all talk about, right? If we're in the industry, personalization is a strategy. It's somewhere on someone's remit. It's part of what we do. Personalization is not a customer problem. We don't walk around as customers going, can't wait to be personalized today. It's not a thing, right? So what is the customer problem or opportunity that you're trying to solve for? And work backwards from that. I thought that was so insightful from whoever it was in the research that kind of gave that. But I think it's a really interesting thing to kind of just take back and think about.
So those are some big tensions, right? And as we said, like we've got a full report there. The report is itself a synthesis of a massive amount of data and experiences and quotes, and it's pulling out from the research standpoint what we saw as the common themes, our interpretation of what these quotes, experiences tell us, what we can do with them, and input from the Luminary team about what does this mean practically for industry. But I think there's a really interesting question for us to, we've come up and sort of raised these challenges, these tensions, to think, where do we go to from here?
Yeah, so, as you can probably sense and hear, and some of you have flicked through the report already, this raises a lot of questions. It raises a lot of topics. It hopefully brings some light to things that, especially those that are sitting in brands, are feeling and experiencing every single day. We never intended to kind of do a bit of research that tried to deliver every single answer to every single challenge. What we wanted to do is really set this baseline because we felt like that was missing. Unless that baseline exists, the challenges are understood, we know where you, as CMOs, as CTOs, as CIOs, CEOs, heads of, whatever you're running in your organization, if you're represented in this report, your challenges are represented, that's our aim. Our aim is to ensure the industry at large now has something to kind of reflect on and look at the next time they come and talk to you about how to solve your challenges. So where are we going to from here? There are three things that we probably want you to do pretty quickly. One, you all have a physical report, which is limited edition run, I'm sure, right, Tay? So they're yours to keep, as Jay said, but that QR code takes you to a landing page where you can download the report for free. I'm sure you'll get an email after this event doing the same thing, but share it to anyone, everyone, your teams. The idea is to get this into as many hands as possible. From there, we actually want your feedback, right? We really want to hear, well, what do you think? Where do you want this to go next? The reason we partnered with CXI Swinburne was we wanted to make sure the research was done with academic rigor and it wasn't something that was us trying to push an opinion or a position. There's nothing to be sold here, right? So that was one. But the second one was we knew that this would potentially spoke off into a number of areas. There are other areas that we could dive into. Someone's already come up to us today and said, I'd love to slice this by industry. Are the same challenges happening across all industries or are they different? That's really interesting, right? So we want your feedback. So you can connect with us on LinkedIn, email us, whatever you're going to do, but we do want to hear from you. The third, as I've kind of mentioned a few times, right, this idea of this piece being something that the industry can act on. This is not a challenge that the tech vendors are just going to solve by themselves. Everyone has a responsibility. Brands, tech vendors, educators, us, consultants, agencies, we create the solutions to the challenges that you read in this report. So the other thing that we're really hoping this does is, causes some changes and some changes of how we act and operate within industry. So they're the three things that we're really hoping happens from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.